Hello and welcome back to the RevOps show. We are back in full swing today with a great episode on sales compensation. Not to spoil anything for you, but sales compensation doesn't work as a motivator. Shocking, right? Except there are certain circumstances which it does work. More often than not, it doesn't. But I won't get into that here. I'll let Doug and Jess explain, starting right here on the RevOps show.
Jessica.
Douglas.
It's Friday.
This Friday has been one hell of a week, let me tell you.
I thought Fridays were nice and relaxing days for you.
They used to be. They used to be.
Apparently Dakota does not want us to talk here. Unfortunately, we don't have the filters. The filters. I'll put on headphones. Maybe she's hearing that. I thought they were like kind of spa days for you.
Oh yeah, they used to be. Not anymore. Not anymore. This is the day when the fires happen. This is the day when everyone wants to talk to me.
Hold on a second, Jess. Fires don't happen when you work with a man. You're hurting the brand here.
Never. We have no fires. Zero fires.
So, how about the podcast? Seeing some of those numbers, this thing.
I know.
Like, your mom must have a lot of friends.
She must. She's very proud. She's very proud.
But
because I'm famous.
I know that you are like barely able to contain excited today.
Why do you say that? Because of the topic?
Because of the news.
Oh, the news. Yeah. Big news. Exciting.
You want to tell everybody the news?
It's the moment that we've been waiting 25 years for. The Backstreet Boys are releasing a Christmas album just in time for my birthday.
Oh, so it's out in October?
Comes out in October.
Wow.
So excited.
Now I saw that it was a Christmas album with a Backstreet Boys twist. What is that?
It means the Backstreet Boys are singing Christmas songs. That's what it means.
So is like the...
That's the twist.
It's not an album. It's not a CD. What is it? I guess it's an MP3 or something?
Well, there's CDs. There's limited edition vinyls. I've got decisions to make about what I'm going to choose to buy.
Are you going to get the collector's certificate for that?
I think I'm going to get the signed CD. I think I'm going to get the signed CD and probably the Target exclusive with 2 different tracks. So I might get 2 CDs. It is really like it's 1999 all over again.
Now, so the signed CD, so signed by a machine.
Probably.
And then what's the Christmas song? Did they share what the tracks are?
They did share the tracks. I don't have them up.
So what's the Christmas song that you're most excited about that they're gonna do?
There's a Feliz Navidad on the Target one that I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit excited to hear.
Wow, that's something you don't hear very often.
Exactly.
Okay, but for those people that don't quite have the ability to go to the Target exclusive,
probably Last Christmas, which is the sample on like all the marketing material.
Are they doing any like modern Christmas stuff? Like any?
Is Last Christmas not considered modern?
I don't know. Are they doing a remake of Mariah Carey's
All I Want for Christmas Is You? Let's see. I don't think so. I don't think you can touch that.
Any Hanukkah songs? Dreidel.
No Hanukkah songs. Sorry.
No
Sorry.
Hanukkah songs? Wow.
No Hanukkah songs.
Wow.
Nope.
Wow. It's kind of polarizing, Jess. But I thought that they'd go a little bit broader. So anyways, hopefully you can
contain my excitement.
Contain your excitement. How old are they? Are they like 60 years old or something now?
They are not that old. No. Kevin might be 60. They're in their 50s.
What are we talking about today, Jess?
Your favorite topic. Sales compensation.
I have
compensation
so many favorite topics.
As a motivator for sales reps.
Alrighty, well, Jess, you know that if you don't kind of start this off and you just have me start talking about it, we might be done before you have the.
We might. It's what happened last week. So,
And then,
you know,
and then that'll lower our listenership because your mom won't share it as much. So we've got to increase the Jess talk time.
by the way, my husband just texted me the plural of vinyl is vinyl. Apparently I said vinyls. So I apologize to all the vinyl aficionados out there. Anyway, I digress. Sales compensation.
Well, that must make you feel good that your husband actually pays attention to you.
He is the one that has to listen to every single episode. He has no choice. He's within earshot. All right. So I guess my first question is does sales compensation
Can you let me know what your first question is when you're more certain?
It's Friday. And Doug knows I'm punchy, so this is gonna be a lot of fun today. Does sales compensation work as a motivator for sales reps?
It depends how you define work and motivator.
Wow. Depends on how you define work and motivator. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's some behavioral theory that says there is no such thing as an external motivator. Motivation can only come from within. But I would say that if something serves to trigger an internal motivation, then that would be distinction without difference. So I would toss away the behavioral argument there. It's actually, we have a blog post on this. For those of you curious, and we'll have it in the show notes, the most common and costly mistake made with sales compensation. And it starts off, in all caps, compensation does not motivate, with one exception. And so one thing that is going to sound very semantical is you didn't ask me if compensation motivates. You asked me if sales compensation motivates. And so,
okay.
So sales compensation is different than compensation, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But compensation does not motivate, unless the one exception is when you're making less money than you need, or when you're lacking important things, then compensation motivates. But it doesn't motivate in the way that you likely want it to motivate. All you have to do is look at companies like VW and Wells Fargo to see what happens when compensation is the motivator. Now, the reason that sales compensation is why I say sales compensation is different from compensation is sales compensation is a form of variable compensation where your compensation is based on outcomes, results, contributions, activities that vary, so that at least theoretically you have some level of control over what your compensation rate is. And I would say, yes, it does motivate because it serves, especially in the absence of other things, it serves as the scorecard. And your sales compensation plan, the sales compensation structure falls into the category of what gets measured gets done. Mm-hmm. Right? You're now measuring something, you're calling something out. One of the reasons why what gets measured gets done, and what gets measured gets done, can be beautiful or it can be horrible. Go back and listen to our episode last week where we talked about efficiency, because your sales compensation plan is the single clearest signal to what you're saying is important. Right. So it is the scoreboard, and what you say moves the number. That is the signal that this is important. And so the scoreboard is important, right? We've said this before. Anyone want to know the power of a scoreboard, of keeping score? Just watch a group of kids before and after someone says, "Hey guys, let's keep score." And winning is important. So the sales compensation is a form of measurement, is a form of scoreboard. And especially in the absence of other things, that tells me what's important, what's the game. It kind of defines what the game is. And so, yes, it does motivate. Does it work? Well, if you're trying to create motivation, yes, it works. In the same way that really no rep is truly, the term is coin operated. In the same way that, rarely does that compensation plan cover the totality of the game. This, by the way, is a growing issue as gamification becomes more important. So we'll probably get into a little bit of gamification today. But so yes, it does motivate, and yes, it does work as a motivator. Does it motivate people to do the things that they should do that they don't want to do? Blah 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 blah. I mean, no, because everybody, I could look at any salesperson and say, well, if they would just do this, they would make more money. And if they were truly motivated by maximizing their compensation, then they would do the things that, whatever those things are that are not doing. I think that, Freakonomics, the basis of Freakonomics is that the structure drives the incentive and the incentive drives the behavior. Right. So that compensation structure, as a matter of fact, they even call it that. They call it the compensation structure, is a key part of the structure. And structure is that invisible hand. Structure is that invisible set of constraints that drives behaviors.
So if it's not going to motivate the right way, so what tactics would you take other than using comp as your motivator? So what are some specific things that you would do to motivate your sales team the right way?
I would map out and have a clearly designed, articulated business process.
We always go there. Always the first point. Map your business process.
Imagine this. What's the purpose of golf? What's the objective in golf? The simple answer is to get the ball from the tee to the hole in the fewest strokes possible.
Okay.
Or actually not to the hole, in the hole. So I'm on the 15th and I drive, and my drive, let's just say it slices quite a bit. And I'm, oh crap. And I finally find my ball, and I notice that the 17th hole is 125 yards away from where my ball is. The 15th hole, which is what I was on, is 300 some yards away with water in between, a couple other things that I have to deal with. Now look, there are a lot of problems with, but back when I golfed, what I could tell you is from 125 yards, I was good. 125 yards. So the objective is get the ball into the hole in the fewest number of strokes.
Right.
So instead of hitting the ball to the 15th hole, I go, oh wait, I'll take out my 8-iron and I'll hit to the 17th hole. Bam, 2 feet from the pin, putt. Right? Doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. It's a ridiculous. Right? Well, why is that? Well, because the rules of golf are very, very clear. What is the game that's being played? So if you want it to motivate correctly, you have to clearly define what's the game that you're playing. So that's why define your business process is always step number one. If the game's not clearly defined, what am I motivating to? And so one of the biggest mistakes that I see made with compensation is used instead of management.
What do you mean by that?
We use compensation to motivate the decision-making process that people take to navigate decisions and actions and behaviors and so on and so forth. If there's no, you show me an organization that has a sales comp plan, I'll show you somebody in management that's complaining that the sales team or individuals on the team are gaming the plan, right? Well, guess what? If gaming the plan is bad, then shame on you. Because it means either the plan wasn't designed correctly, right? I like to create plans that the more you game them, the more we get the behaviors that we want. But also there's a management element to it. So there's an intent beyond. We have fit criteria. Right?
Yeah.
I need to manage. Are you, not only are you closing business, but are you closing the right type of business? Are you closing business in a way that is conducive to other things? The more you use a comp plan, the more you find yourself frequently changing the plan. And, the more you change the plan, the more you create winners and losers through no fault of their own. And I've seen it happen regularly where, comp plan gets changed and all of a sudden, I was playing the game according to the rules that were set. And then, it's February 3rd. We're changing the plan. All of a sudden, now I'm in a completely different, that's going to create, an awful lot of disruption.
You had mentioned the more you game that you would want to set it up. So the more that you game the plan, the more you have the behavior you want. So can you give kind of an example of what that looks like?
This gets to the point on gamification. I was actually having a conversation with somebody earlier this week who's just been hired by a, very large company. And part of what he's doing is working on some of the gamification elements for utilization. And I gave him a piece of advice on gamification. And again, this falls into the what gets measured gets done. The funny thing is, as we're talking about this, and I'm thinking about it in this way, we could talk about like this conversation is going to align so much with other conversations we've had about, measuring things and so forth. But what I find is most gamification is overly focused on the result. And the reason it's overly focused on the result is at the end of the day, what we want is the result, and measuring the result is pretty easy. But the two easiest things to measure are the end result and the initial activity.
Mm-hmm.
And most people have come along to understand that measuring and rewarding on just activity, the activity, if I measure like you used to get bonused on how many calls you made.
Yeah.
Right. So, hey, I'll call joke lines. I literally know somebody that one of their key measurements of their team was number of calls and talk time and average talk time. So this sales rep actually programmed an automated element that he could put in a list of numbers because it had one of these power auto dialers that it would call a joke line, stay on for, I think it was 4 minutes, and then hang up. So their talk time came right in. The thing that uncovered it was that someone identified that like 70% of the calls were happening after 7 p.m. So anyways, so you realize that activity doesn't lead to the outcomes that you're looking for. But the problem is when you measure, when you game it, when the score is on the result, you're not actually motivating behavior. So what I talk about and what I told my friend was, you want to make sure that whatever you're gamifying is pre-intervention. What is the behavioral intervention that you want? What's the cause? So by the way, as part of defining that system, I thought you were going to ask me what's my second tactic. Do a what causes outcomes, what causes results analysis, or, so if it's sales comp, what causes sales?
Mm-hmm.
What we want to do is identify what's the behavior that when done right will lead to an outcome that has a high likelihood, an outcome has a causal relationship to the result that you want. Right. And so, my favorite example of this is how we recommend as a major element of all sales comp programs is we track meaningful conversations. Now, we don't just say, is it a meaningful conversation? A meaningful conversation has a very specific definition. That definition is we learn something material about the prospect that will enable us to better personalize, contextualize, orchestrate future activities to increase the probability of success.
Yep.
And both parties agree to do something by a certain time. And it can start off very light. But if you look at that, because it has an advanced component to it, it has to end in a win or a loss, right? And so I remember where one of the first reps that we put this in place with, and one of the problems that I found, because he was, one of the problems that we have, did you know, sorry, we're going to be a little bit stream of consciousness here, but did you know that real estate agents sell their homes for materially more than they sell their clients' homes for?
No, I did not know that. No.
Right. Do you know why?
No.
Because of the sales comp program.
Oh.
Right? A real estate agent gets 3 to 6% of the sale price.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're debating between selling your home for $300,000 or $400,000,
yep,
that's $100,000 difference to you. It's a maximum $6,000 difference.
Yeah.
Right. So what is the real estate agent naturally motivated for? And by the way, this happens not because real estate agents are being malicious. This is the invisible structure. This is the motivator. What are real estate agents motivated to do? Sell the house fastest. And by the way, they want to sell the house fastest for two reasons. It's in their economic interest,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And one of the things that brings greatest delight, like I know, if you want to get the most for your house, I'm going to have to manage you harder because you want to get the house sold as quickly as possible. So did you know that weather stations always, news stations, weather forecasts almost always overrate the probability of rain?
Yeah, I did know that.
Do you know why? Because if they say it's going to rain and it doesn't, we're not mad at the weather person.
Right.
And if they say it's not going to rain and it does, we are.
Yep.
So there's no cost of being wrong on one case or a small, right? So those are all examples of where, where that compensation does motivate behavior. Now, you have a sales comp program, you're comped on closing business, hitting certain numbers, et cetera.
Yep.
So what happens? Well, I want to get to the end as fast as I can, right? I'm incentivized to go for speed over effectiveness, go for speed over velocity, if you will.
Yep.
And so one of the very common mistakes is reps go too far too fast, especially early, right? And why is that? Well, in the earliest stages of a sale, it's when things are least clear. They're at their lowest probability. So it's a higher risk of time. Yet, when I originally said this, it was new. I've seen more and more people say it. So I don't think it's as, new and insightful as it was when I originally said it. The best way to shorten the sales cycle is to slow down the process. Right? Because what ends up happening is we go super fast early and then we play a whole bunch of catch up late and our win rates go down. So you end up spending more time.
Yeah.
Right? And so I was talking to the rep and I said, and he had made the classic mistake of trying to go too far and lost the opportunity. And I said, Frank, I guess Frank's our go-to anonymous name. I said, Frank, why didn't you make this? Why didn't you stop here to set up the next conversation? You would have had two meaningful conversations plus this, because we have this point system. You would have generated 3 times the number of points.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget what his response was. He said, but Doug, the last thing I want to do is game the system. And I said, yeah, but actually, I want you to have 3 meaningful conversations instead of one. Because you know what? If you really have a meaningful conversation, it'll advance, right? It'll keep you in alignment. Right? And so what I know is, and I've said this for now probably about 5 years. If I could only have, are you familiar with the idea of what a desert island metric is?
No, I'm not.
So if you're on a desert island and had no ability to communicate with anybody, and you could only have X number of metrics, so you could only have one metric.
Yeah.
Right. So I've heard some people go 3 metrics, but if you could only have one metric on a desert island to know how your business is doing, what would your one metric be? And my desert island metric would be meaningful conversations. Tell me how many meaningful conversations we're having. Right. Because by the way, if I have meaningful conversations, winning sales is a management process. Winning the sale is a sales process management. I don't mean necessarily sales process manager, but it's a process management thing more than it is something else. Having the meaningful conversation, that's what I need the sales rep for. Mm-hmm. Right. And especially that's where I need a strong sales rep. Once everything's defined, once the need is clearly defined, what's needed to fit the need is clearly defined, you don't need a superstar to quote unquote close the business if you do the right stuff early. And so what we do, is we bonus on meaningful conversations. Now for a sales rep, what's that based on? It is based on revenue.
Right.
Right. But we're still incentivizing the result, but your multiple, if you will, the gamification, the scoreboard, all those other things are moved much earlier to the pre-intervention. Right. And oh, by the way, we have an assessment process, which is another key metric and is a big point maker that generates, because, you know, if you do meaningful conversations, we have the combination of an ideal client profile rubric. So we have a company scorecard
Mm-hmm.
that leads into a deal scorecard. And so we have a scorecard that defines, is this a viable opportunity? Does this meet criteria? We have meaningful conversations. We have a major milestone, roughly assessment, right? That's not what we call it, but that's what it is.
Right.
Right. And then we have one business. So I want the rep early thinking assessment, because that is the intervention. Right. My scoring and management works to ensure that the rep isn't bringing low value to assessment, so we're rewarding bad stuff. But that's a management process,
Right.
as well as, right? Meaningful conversation creates that aspect of advancement. And oh, by the way, if you get the assessment, the points for the assessment are well worth getting the assessment legitimately.
Right.
Right. But if it's not ready for that point, so you need to have another conversation, it shows up on the scoreboard and it adds to what, you know, to what your reward is. So that having that early conversation shows up on the scoreboard. I get points for that. Look at that. I'm winning. And so, like, that's kind of how we've, from defining our process, have mapped a compensation structure to align with the behaviors that we want to see.
So one note on meaningful conversations, and this may take us too far off, but you've got a very specific definition for that. So is that somewhere where, when we're talking about motivators for salespeople, when we're talking about comp plans, when we're talking about plans for the sales rep, do you find that you're often not specific enough about what the rules of the game are, what the lanes are? Because I know sometimes with comp plans that I've seen for sales comp, like, it's really hard to understand like what actually you're supposed to do. So is that a place where I guess people fall short, is not being specific enough with the sales reps about what the expectation is, what they should be doing?
Well, so there's yes, and I know one of the big things that's come out. There's a whole laundry list of applications that have come out that not only will auto calculate what sales comp, what commission should be, but they're also tools for the sales rep to be able to project what they're going to get paid. And one of the things I say is, as a general rule, I'm sure there are exceptions, and I might be one at one point, who knows, but if I need a computer program, if a rep needs a computer program to be able to get a good feel for how much money they're going to make based on certain things, you probably have too much ambiguity in your business process. Well, you know what you're actually doing? You're actually, what's happening? You're actually, it's an example of what you're rewarding is late in the sales cycle. Right.
Yep.
And again, it goes back to that pre-intervention. But yeah, I think that, sometimes it's too simple. You get 10% of closed business. I'm just making it 10% of revenue closed. Right. Okay.
Yep.
I see this gamification contest, et cetera. We have partners. Hey, the opportunity expense paid. We're going to, HubSpot just did this expense paid. We're going to cover your inbound.
Yeah.
The agents, the partner that sells them, at each tier that sells the most Service Hub over the next 60 days wins. Okay, great. That's nice. You're now rewarding somebody for for where they happen to be, like that's not going to change any actual behavior.
Yeah.
Right. Because if that were going to actually cause me to generate a new service hub sale that wouldn't have been a service hub sale in any real way, well, it's not going to show up for 60 days.
Right.
Right. So it's okay. Hey, everybody, let's take a look. Do we want to play in this contest? Okay. What's the pipeline look like? How much service hub business? You're rewarding people for catching business, not creating it.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that that lack of clarity. I think the lack of clarity in the comp plan is 9 times out of 10 symptomatic of a lack of clarity somewhere early.
And when you say somewhere early, you mean somewhere early in the sales process, or
earlier in the revenue acceleration framework, or earlier in the process of building, it's a lack of clarity around what the business process is,
what the business process is,
what's the scoreboard. Right. Everyone says salespeople are only motivated by commission. That's not true. I mean, if they were truly only motivated by commission, the worst salesperson would be doing even worse things. The slimiest salesperson would be even slimier if they were only motivated by commission. What they're motivated by is the scoreboard. What they're motivated by is winning, right? Being on, making President's Club, the trip only a piece of it. I mean, the trip's nice. Don't get me wrong. Right. But it's more about not being on the trip.
Right.
Or the motivation is more about not, and I would say even more than not being on the trip is not being able to say President's Club. Because if you're not President's Club, then what did Alicia Silverstone say? You're a loser.
Wow. Wow. We're doing that. Okay.
I got it right. That was Alicia Silverstone, right?
I don't remember if it was her that did it in the movie, but she was in Clueless, which I think is what you're referencing.
Right, but you're right. So that's and by the way, then like I when this happened, all of a sudden that starts triggering off all kinds of other behaviors that aren't always good.
Right. Yeah. So we talked about business process mapping. We talked about what causes sales analysis. What are the other things you would do?
Or organizationally, and I think this is something that RevOps, being that this is the RevOps show, is perfect for leading. Is you need to develop a compensation philosophy.
What does that mean?
What is your sales compensation philosophy? What is your point of view on compensation? Is compensation a reward or a punishment? By the way, let's understand at a very, very basic level, the reason that sales commissions exist. People talk about sales commissions as an incentive. They do not exist because it's an incentive. Commissions exist as a risk reduction strategy. The reason that sales started off as 100% commission was I only paid you if you sold something. So I had no cost. Right. And so one of the problems is we've taken a risk reduction strategy, a risk reduction game, and we try to create all this other prettiness to it. I worked for a company that made it very, very clear that they rewarded top performers. And they rewarded top performers to the extent that they punished bottom performers. Mm-hmm. So if you are not going to be a top performer, you need to understand that you will be subsidizing our top performers.
Right.
Now, you can make an argument whether that is a good philosophy or not.
Sure.
Now, I'll tell you where I worked, it was a good philosophy because there was a lot of management that went into that. Because that could totally go awry. But the point of it was, if you're not going to be a top performer, if you're not going to hit these types of numbers, then this is not the right place for you. Right. So that's going to tell you a lot about what's going on. The next question is, what's more important to you, protecting your downside or to share in the upside? Is this really about reward? And by the way, if you say this is for reward, then I got a very base level question for you. What's your base comp? Mm-hmm. What's your base comp? right? If you have base comp, we have, our sales team has a base comp. We sell mid 6-figure deals. Reps are responsible for closing, multi-millions. We're selling to enterprise level. Base salary is 60,000. Your risk reduction.
Yeah.
Your risk reduction, right? If more than, there's probably a number before here. It's probably less than 50%, but if more than 50% of comp is incentive, then it's risk reduction, right? Understand, accept that, etc. What level of variance are you comfortable with? By the way, this is going to tell you a lot about what type of reps you're going to have, what types of cycles you're going to have. What role do you feel compensation should play for the business, for employees overall, for salespeople? It used to be easier to have these crazy sales plans. Actually, there's a great video of someone making fun of Jack Nicholson's speech at the end of A Few Good Men about sales reps and their expense accounts. Because everyone, the salesperson gets everything paid for. They get to take people out to lunch. You don't like my expense reports. Grab a phone, make a call.
Right.
You want my expense reports. You need my expense reports. That kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Because salespeople it used to be salespeople were, they, no matter how you did it, they were lone wolves. They were out working there. Today winning business is a team game, and I'm not saying your salespeople should be comped the same way other people are comped, but it's going to bleed over, and how you're paying your salespeople is definitely going to tell a story based upon how you're paying other people. So understand that. How comfortable do you want people to be? By the way, you want salespeople to motivate? I'm sorry, you want sales compensation to motivate? Give me a really small base.
Yeah.
Reward me only for new business, right? Make it so that I had a sales manager, and this is a bad philosophy, but it was a philosophy that salespeople always needed to be uncomfortable. So once a salesperson started making a certain amount of money, like what the sales manager would do is, well, you need to buy a bigger house.
Oh my God.
Right? Because if your nut was covered, then you're going to be lazy. So we need you to need.
Right.
Right. And look, that is the place. Now, again, that ends up incentivizing a lot of slimy behavior, because if my life is dependent on it, I'm much more likely to lie, cheat, and steal. How quickly do you want to reward key outcomes or activities? Right. What's the ebb and flow of it? So there's an overall philosophy of what role is compensation playing? Where does compensation fit in the overall schema of the behaviors of the game that we're trying to play? I think too often we rely too much on compensation, and that's where it screws up. That's where we get our near coin operated salespeople. That's where we get our, well, if the buyer didn't ask, that's where we get. And I'll never forget this. I was coaching a sales team. This is really early in Imagine's lifetime, that a moving company, and I was doing ride-alongs, and this one rep was calling on somebody who was moving internationally, and she needed to move their 2 cards to where they were going international, and she clearly didn't know a lot about what was involved. The company had been referred to her by someone, and so the rack rate for moving car is just like so insanely above what anyone charges. It's hilarious. And she said, so he said, this is, and she said, oh, really? It's going to be that much? And he goes, yeah. And she goes, oh, okay. And then, back in the office, oh my God, you will not believe the deal that I just closed. You will not believe what I got. Can you believe I got that for moving 2 cards? And I'm going, fucking seriously? And I wonder why salespeople have those. Now this was, candidly, that's one of the firsthand experiences that made me say, hey, you know what? There might be something wrong.
Yeah.
With how people are implementing sales comp.
Is there such a focus on it because that's like the lowest common denominator? That's the easiest thing to go to, or is it just because it's the way it's always been done?
I think it's the way it's always been done. It's like I'm, in some ways beyond the easiest. I think it's the most obvious.
Yeah.
It is the most tangible. And look, how many meaningful conversations does it take to create a sale? I don't know. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? I don't know. They're both, over time I can get an assumption.
Yeah.
But you know what? Could we have a lot of meaningful conversations and our win rate goes down? Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
But I see, and this is where I laugh because people talk about it's the numbers. It's the numbers. We've got the data. It's the numbers. Well, I watch baseball players have a bad year and get big contracts next year. And you go, how could you pay somebody who hit 230 that kind of contract? I mean, sure, they were really good the years before. Well, when you look at the underlying numbers, the things that led to the results, they were still performing as well as they were performing. By the way, the Red Sox are grateful for that, if there are any Red Sox fans that are listening, because Pedro Martinez had a crappy year before the Red Sox signed him to a big contract. And there were people that were saying, yep, see, he's too small. He's not going to stand up to it. Except while his obvious numbers were bad, the underlying, what were then called advanced analytics, were still very strong and consistent with everything he had done from a career standpoint. So it was just, the result was abnormal. Well, guess what? If you're still, running the process, I mean, I'll make the argument that a sales rep is only partially responsible for win rate. And you know what? If a sales rep's win rate continues to go down and you can't recover it to get it back up into, then you know what you do? You say, I guess this isn't the right place for you anymore. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, and again, this goes back to, if you are comping, if it is about closed business, if it is about the revenue, and you don't have, the only exception to this would be if you have a significant base. I mean, a significant base. But if the reward is only about the revenue, then it's risk reduction.
Or punishment. So
yeah, well, look. So look, I'm a believer of putting lower grids at a rate lower than what your upper grid gets. Like maybe you'll get 120, 130% what base comp will be at the highest level. So at the lowest level, you would get 60 or 70%. So yeah, that punishes you for bad. And you know why I want to, now, by the way, what I won't let happen in a plan like that is, and this gets to variability, how variable do you want it to be? Like if you have a bad few months, no, you're not going to be down at that lowest level. You're not going to be, in that punishment zone. But I want everything to align. If this is not the right place for you, if this is not a place for you to be successful, I want it to be really clear that this is not a place for it to be, this is not, you're not being successful. I want you to want to go somewhere else.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I firmly believe if you have to fire somebody, then you did something wrong. Right. Something should trigger somebody. And again, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but so again, I think it comes down to, it's just the most obvious. And it's the, it's obvious that, it's path of least resistance and it takes the least amount of guts.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about business process mapping, what causes sales, compensation philosophy, anything else tactic wise that you should be looking at as opposed to when you're thinking about how to motivate your sales team?
What are the components of the result that you're trying to achieve? So for example, it is, the larger the deal, the better. Is that true? Most people will say, yes, that's true. But I'm going to then ask the question, is that always true?
We've talked about this a lot.
Right. So like I know a company that works really, and like for us, we work really well in mid-market. We work really well in this space.
Yep.
25 to 250 salespeople is kind of our sweet spot right now.
Yep.
Right? So give me a choice between 500 salespeople and 150 salespeople, and the 500 salespeople will be a larger deal. And can we serve a 500? Yes, we can. It's within our bands.
Mm-hmm.
But I would rather have the 150 sales
Yeah.
seat, right? That's our win rate's going to be higher. Our ability to serve, delight, et cetera, is going to be higher. And the reason is that's what our systems are built for. 500 seats would be, begins to get into some outlier territory.
Yep.
And so there's actually a mid-size deal, if you will, that like once a deal size begins to get above a certain level, it's like, you know what, that's not better. And to some degree, it even becomes worse. Like, I don't want my sales reps hunting $1 million deals, right? That's not the game that we play, right? Does that mean I wouldn't take $1 million deal? Yeah, I probably would take $1 million deal, but would I rather have 5 $200,000 deals? I probably would, or it would be really, really close.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I'd rather have my rep thinking and hunting, the $200,000 to $500,000, just making up numbers here, versus, and so that's another element of how we do things. Another question comes, what role do you want? I mean, what is the sales role? Because sales and sales comp have a lot of different roles. But how much is a sales rep responsible for retention, right? And so, is there a card back? Is there a clawback? I'm sorry. Is there a clawback? If we bring somebody in and they don't stay for a minimum amount of time, does a rep lose?
Yeah.
Some commission. Do you pay the rep for the 12-month deal up front, even though it's going to take you 12 months? Do you pay them on a month-by-month basis? That again gets back a little bit into philosophy, but what's that game? If I think the rep is really responsible for retention, how much comp do they get in year 2? Do I get paid the same in year 2? In which case I'm more account manager, right? And the danger there is that as my book grows, I'm going to become more service oriented, right? So am I there to get new business? Am I there to manage existing business, et cetera? But even if I'm new business and it turns over, if I'm a new business salesperson and I'm charged with, retention, I should be thinking about retention, then, how much into year 2? So again, all those different things kind of come in to determine what the philosophy and what the schema is, and defines what your sales program is going to be. Realize that if you don't take a little bit of sophistication into your sales comp, any good sales rep is going to get to the point where one of two things, depending upon how the comp is set up. In one case, they're going to be making more money than they ever thought that they would make. So they're at a comfort level. So you better have some sophistication to keep that motivation and to keep that focus going. Or I've seen in other places where it's kind of like, now to continue to make the money that I want to be making, it's now too hard. I've basically worked through a level and it now becomes easier for me to go somewhere else and kind of start over. Right. That's a path. Now, by the way, it's not wrong. I know a company that is literally how they manage their sales team. They have new salespeople there for 2 to 4 years. Yeah. Right. And so at about year 3, year 4, the good reps, they're like, wait, I
worked somewhere where that was.
Although you worked there, and I'm not, and I think that was badly, that was actually misapplied.
I don't know that we're talking about the same place.
Okay, so never mind. But again, I've seen that done correctly. I think in today's world, that's probably not as viable as it used to be. But again, those are the examples of where and how things get into, from a sales comp.
So I think I have some pretty good takeaways. This was a lot, which I knew it would be. What's the game you're playing? You got to define that for the rep. Don't focus on outcomes. Focus on what causes sales. How do you want to motivate your reps? I loved what you said about compensation as a reward versus a punishment. I don't think we talk about it being a punishment. That doesn't get called out very often. And then the last thing that you said about making sure there's sophistication in your sales comp plan. I think that's another thing that doesn't get thought about, talked about, addressed. So those are my key takeaways. Bam! Oh, that was really loud. On that note, Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Hopefully you're not wearing headphones.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. Sales compensation can work if the rep is depending on the extra money, but chances are you're better off finding another way to motivate them. There's more satisfaction from a job than just money. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and share the episode. If you have any questions you would like to ask Doug or Jess about sales compensation or anything else RevOps related, email me at hannah@imaginellc.com or hit us up on Twitter @demandcreator. Until next time, remember, can't solve your upstream problems downstream.